Well, as I look over seeing our audience today, I am reminded of what Jesus said at the Last Supper. If you guys want to get in the picture, you better get on this side of the table. The Reverend is laughing, thank God. Well, I mean, what a wonderful experience this must be for all of you. Oh, my goodness. Sharing old war stories with one of the most important eras in this nation's history. So let me ask you, if we can begin maybe with a little contemporary slant here. What one piece of counsel would you like to share with young people today who feel about America not unlike your own feelings back in the day? This is a valuable opportunity for them. Let's hear from you.
Never have a meeting without an equal representation of men and women.
One month ago, I was speaking in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the 50th anniversary of the first teach-in. And we called the event not a memory from the past. We called the event Teach-in plus 50, End the War Against the Planet. And what I want to urge is that we stop dividing the question of the survival of life on the planet, including human civilization, from social justice, that we start, and from peace, that we start talking about eco-social justice, that there is no division any longer between the protection of the whole web of life and the protection of black, brown, Filipino, one of the first massive deaths from what I never call global warming. Warming seems so pleasant. I call it global scorching, was thousands of Filipinos killed by the worst typhoon in recorded history, sparked by the climate crisis. We need to bring that together and stop acting as if they are separate. The same power structure that is destroying the planet is the same one that has for centuries smashed black youth with the police, has starved people in Appalachia, is destroying mountains for the sake of coal. It's the same structure.
Reverend, you wanted to say?
Yes.
Staughton.
I think as a lieutenant of A.J. Musty, I would be remiss if I didn't say, as a democratic Marxist, that capitalism is in fact the cause of all of these accidental wars. Having said that, I'd also say that there's a danger in not realizing how important the individual is and the sense of morality which a genuine movement needs. And we don't, I fear, get that from radicals very often. We got it from Dr. King, from A.J. Musty, from Father Dan Berrigan, from Dorothy Day, from Rabbi Heschel. So I think we ought to look at that sometime. For myself, I would quote Allen Ginsberg, "America, I'm putting my queer shoulder to the wheel."
Yeah. Please.
One of the nice things about being 120 is you've got a long memory. The last
1, 2, 1, 1.
1, 2, there you go. The last time this church was filled with people like us, Dr. King was in this pulpit in March of 1968. Where my mind goes when we think about what to do now is more general. Some of us believe what the Exodus was first thought to teach. First, for most of us, we know we live in Egypt. Second, and it's really important, we believe there's a promised land out there somewhere. And third, there's a wilderness we have to walk through, and the only way we can do that is by holding hands in unity. We need that kind of perspective if we're going to stay for the course. It's a long walk. You get depressed. We have to have faith that we're going through that wilderness together, we'll reach the other side.
Question is,
Oh, go ahead. Excuse me, Reverend, please.
how do you get people on the walk, Dick? I mean,
How do you get people?
I mean, how do we get people into that journey that Dick wants us on?
Well, my observation when I'm asked that by college students is there are tens of thousands of college students and adults today on that walk, but unlike the Vietnam War, they're walking into 22 different movements.
Yeah.
We had a great impact. We spawned nonprofits all over the country. Women got mad, then they got organized, and they created organizations that weren't here in 1960. In 1960, if you were a lawyer in Philadelphia, there was one job at the ACLU. In Philadelphia now, we have 24 advocacy law firms. I believe we were responsible for that. It's all over the country. So things are happening. If you're asking about unity, I think Arthur had his finger on what we probably have to be unified around in terms of what's out there now in terms of energy. And it's around the environment.
Yeah. Judy, you wanted to say?
Me? All right. 2 sentences. I often wonder why I'm up here, and I've decided one of the things is that I'm 93 years old, and everybody expects me to do something, so I continue to do it. But I want to give some credit to some of the people that helped me do this. One, my husband, who gave me a lot of room to do all the things that I did. And the other was Bella Abzug, who was my mentor. And she helped me run for office in Hunter College with the slogan, "Don't be snooty, vote for Judy." And I won, so she became my best friend.
Anybody?
It's a great line.
I'd like to see, I want you to speak to the United States as we find it today, based on your own experiences. You stopped the war, you got rid of 2 presidents. I mean, what you've done has been so powerful and so important. And we look up today, I mean, don't you wonder why your legacy isn't expressing itself more profoundly today? We're spending $2 billion a day on things that go boom. Our Bill of Rights, our whole Constitution is being eroded. The fundamentals of this nation. And the American people are standing mute. And we have the president with signature strikes. Now, he decides who we're going to kill. Aren't you, I mean, are you never tempted to hide under the covers?
So
People are not standing mute. I mean,
right.
I mean, we may not be doing what we ought to do or as effectively as we could, but to say we're standing mute is a misstatement, to say the least.
Right. Well, it's an overstatement, probably, certainly. Certainly this group, isn't it? And I believe that there are millions of people out there who agree with us. But I don't hear them.
So, Gloria Steinem, a year ago, she and I were turning 80 at about the same time. So, she spoke about where we're at. And she said something that for me has absolutely crystallized the truth. She said our whole society is living at the moment like what happens when an abused wife leaves the house. She says that's the moment of greatest liberation possibility and the moment of greatest danger. The abuser at that moment can go into crazy violence. I think we are, in fact, the seeds of the transformation, and they are scared out of their minds and ready to use whatever violence they can in order to stop that liberation. But we are real. It's not true that we are mute or whatever. We are real, and she was absolutely right. It is a risky moment, a dangerous moment, and a possible liberation moment.
I don't think we're standing quietly. I think even as we're meeting here, the kids in Baltimore, the youth in Ferguson, and more important, the number of demonstrations all across the country in those communities tells us something new is happening. What I do think we ought to try to do, and I, at 85 can't do it, is to pull together some of us and build a kind of social democratic movement which would link the issues of cutting the arms budget to zero, closing down the CIA, closing down the FBI, building decent housing, making sure kids could go to college without running up a lifetime of debt. Those are programs that are not that radical. They make sense.
I think I'm 85 too, but I think we ought to find a way to organize those 85-year-old radicals. No, we could do a lot of good.
Well said.
Yes, yes, Mark.
Can everybody hear what I'm?
Yes.
Okay. There's certain things that we should be very happy about. First of all, that we're all together and that we're a community. Second of all, that you should always hire a good lawyer. Because if you don't have a good lawyer when you're about to lose, you're in trouble. Third is you need street heat. And by street heat, you need to be able to organize from the street to get people in the offices to hear what is going on in the street. And so there's this dialectic, if you will, between those two relationships. And that dialectic becomes the basis upon which real change can occur. Not forever. Never forever, not for 10,000 years. Give us 2 generations and let it begin again. And let us at least move a tiny bit further ahead. And that's our job. And that's what the people here have been able to show in their lives. And God bless all of you.
Who wants to add? Cora?
Could I suggest that it's time to be very serious about education, about teaching for peace, because it doesn't come with our DNA, teaching for human rights, for disarmament, for nonviolence, for traditional peace practices, teaching people for sustainable development. We can do it at every level, from pre-kindergarten through the university. But in order to reach peace, I think we have to teach peace. And there's no reason why we can't do it now.
I'd like to build on that. Early in the Vietnam War, I went with Dan Berrigan over to Brooklyn, where he was to talk to 22 Catholic sisters who taught history in the parochial schools. And I don't want to say anything untoward, but they really liked Daniel. They really liked Dan Berrigan. And they weren't quite sure they wanted to go to a demonstration, but they really liked Dan. And his message, which I thought was so great, he said, all you really have to do is do what you're called to do here. Teach all of American history.
Yes.
Teach all of American history. If you do that, you'll be helping to raise a generation that's better than my generation, because we weren't taught all of American history. I thought, for all of us who want to change the world tomorrow, just think of the French organizer, union leader. They said, so how do you keep going after 38 years? He said, oh, at night I have the most revolutionary dreams, and during the day I take the most incremental steps. It's a long road.
Very good.
I don't think you can make it forward in creating a new world unless we have a community. And I think that we are too timid about saying we can gather some people around us and find a way to carry out this radical commitment to change the world. And if we try to do it by ourselves, we're going to run out of steam. But if we have people around us, then we're encouraged and sustained.
Dave.
I think I really do like the idea of learning our history. And the Vietnam War taught me that. I was horrified by the Vietnam War, all 10 years of it. And it forced me to look back at the real history. But my suggestion is we've got, and always have had, two Americas. Don't hate America. It's got a terrible legacy, but it also has a wonderful legacy. All of you are part of that other America, and it's always been a struggle. From day one, it's been a struggle. So we need to have faith in that other America that is in our history, along with slavery, destruction of the Indian culture, all of the rest of it. So yes, we should know the history, and then realize part of that is a history of resistance, of building, of co-ops, of trade unions, of political parties that we have a right to be proud of.
I'd like to remind everyone that today is May Day.
Amen. We got to.
And Peter Yarrow, there's a pretty good song connected with May Day. The last verse goes, in our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies, magnified 1,000-fold.
Amen.
We can bring to birth a new
world from the ashes of the old.
For our union, our solidarity makes us
strong.
And just, wait a sec, just to follow up on that with a couple of experiences or observations. A few months before the invasion of Iraq, I made a trip to Chicago together with two working class friends, one white, one black, to the founding meeting of something that called itself Labor Against the War. And when we got to Chicago, we discovered that the meeting was going to be held in the local union hall of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Now, the Teamsters are not well known for their courageous leadership in foreign policy, so I went to the stewards and I said, what's going on? And they said it was the Vietnam vets. They hit the mic at the local union meeting and said they had seen this movie before. I think we should not give up on the white working class.
Right.
And to make that same point in another way, the Department of Veterans Affairs has discovered a disability caused by war in Iraq and Afghanistan that they call moral injury. Moral injury is something that can be experienced by volunteers as well as by conscripts in a selective service system such as we had in Vietnam. Moral injury is when the man operating the drone or the soldier in the field with his weapon watches the unnecessary death of a child. Either he causes it or he watches it caused. That can happen to anyone, and we have to believe in the possibility of reaching out to volunteers who may in fact be stronger opponents of war than the conscientious objector from a church background, because that volunteer has seen what war really means. And so I'm pleading, I'm urging, I'm exhorting friends and neighbors not to give up on that particular section of the American people. Always remembering, of course, the motto of the little girl in Carl Sandburg's poem, The People Yes, who was watching her first military parade. And she was puzzled by it. She said, "What are they?" And the older and wiser said, "Oh, those are soldiers." The little girl was quiet for a while, and then she said, "I know something." And the patronizing adult said, "Yes, dear, what do you know?" "Sometime they're going to give a war and nobody will come."
Right.
Daniel, we haven't heard from you.
As I listen to my friends here, I've learned, I'm listening and learning as before, as in the past, and I've learned so much from a number of you, Mark and Art, Staughton, Cora, and Dave certainly, but I realize a lesson of Vietnam for the young, which your first question is this, that the most famous motto possibly of the movement is very sound on the whole, but not entirely reliable. I just looked up, it was Jack Weinberg in 1965, the year we're memorializing here, who said, there's a saying in the movement, don't trust anyone over 30. All of us here, up here, were 30 or over in 1965. And actually, the motto was obviously wrong for 8 of the people here, for all of you but me. Because in '65, I was in the Pentagon and shortly to go to Vietnam for the State Department for 2 years and to come back. So I wasn't to be trusted. My judgment was not to be trusted. The motto was okay for me. But I did learn very specifically, if I hadn't gone to a meeting, that Dave McReynolds was a key person at the War Resisters League and the War Resisters International. I would not have learned better. And so the lesson for the young is change is possible. And not only for older people, Ed Snowden, Chelsea Manning had the same trajectory I did. And I'm very admiring that it took them much less long to see the error of what they were doing than it took me. And I have to say too, a thought comes to me from last night. I was having dinner with my daughter and her 2 children, Mary Ellsberg, and she handed me a piece of paper that she'd given at a Quaker women's retreat recently, supposed to be humorous. She said, but I learned a lot from it last night. It's relevant to tonight and what I just said. First of all, her 2 grandchildren, Ana Martinez and Julio Martinez, when she was in Nicaragua for 18 years, both invited me to go to Baltimore with them today on a bus to demonstrate. and maybe get arrested, but we looked at the time schedule, and I couldn't have been sure of getting back here in time for honoring all of you. But my daughter, for the first time in this little piece, told a story that I had often told, but she didn't, which was that in 1971, when she was 10 years old, there was a night when I was at a Xerox machine and her brother, who was 13, was collating Pentagon Papers, and Mary, who was 10, was cutting top secret off the top and bottom of the paper. But that didn't, as happens with children, that didn't entirely take. She went in, she said in this piece, and it was true, to a youthful rebellion in her teens and later, which took the form of refusing to get arrested. And recently, Anna, her daughter, had prevailed on her to get arrested with her for the first time at 57. And she said, I kind of see what Dad was talking about all these years. And it was a very bonding experience. She said it was the proudest experience of her life recently. And she said, the downside is that I'm becoming my father. So anyone can change, and the young couldn't have better models than the people I learned from here.
Right.
To take on what Cora said about education. At the United Nations, I represent Peace Action as an NGO. And the one thing I do is I get interns. Get yourself some young people, attach them to you, teach them what we know and what we've done. And it is wonderful. There are lots of young people here who should be attached to people like us, and that's the best way to teach peace.
Well, I didn't lie to you when I said this would be over any moment, faster than you realize. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want you to take advantage of this moment in front of your brothers and sisters who were in the trenches. And I am so impressed that you were so early, and I was so late. And I will always regret that. Share with us now, before we wind this up, what do you think it was that made you so smart? And really, and why is it so difficult? And I'm the only person in my crowd of graduates from the 1957 class of the University of Notre Dame. I have like 12, 13 buddies, and I'm the only person in the crowd who thinks drones are a bad idea, who thinks, the point is, they all voted for Nixon, they all supported the Vietnam War. Why is that? Why am I this outcast?
Well, it begins with the fact you should probably get some new friends.
You need new friends.
I mean, if you went to Notre Dame, you had a really good president who was very progressive. There are very good people at Notre Dame, so I'm sure you could broaden that group and maybe influence them. It's only you're working overtime with these guys. So get a few more people like yourself in the group.
Okay. Very good. I accept your counsel.
Two points. One of them, which bears on your colleagues, we must never give up on dialogue. Not with each other. We're already convinced. On dialogue with the people we don't agree with. We don't do enough of that. And second, at some point tonight, someone has to say the fact that one reason the war ended was because 3 million Vietnamese died. It was a military struggle which was more decisive, I hate to say it, than our movement. I wish it was otherwise. But in rejoicing at the liberation of Vietnam and in our role in that, which the Vietnamese accept as important. Let's not diminish the extreme importance. If 1,000 years passes, the fact they defeated the world's greatest military power will be remembered.
First of all,
Cora.
I think it should be made very clear that you are very, very welcome, and you're wonderful, and I wish there was a slot at 11 o'clock at night for you to run a nighttime program.
Amen.
Thank you.
But I have to remind everyone that the year 2020, which also stands for perfect vision,
Yes.
will be the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the charter of which says, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And a group of people globally, beginning to grow larger in number, are talking about getting the United Nations to declare an end to war in the year 2020, to put an end to war. And this is an idea whose time has certainly come, and we need all the people and all the energy and all the creative genius, men and women, and people from all kinds of backgrounds and foregrounds to get together. War is a failed institution, and it should not be allowed to continue.
5 minutes left. Arthur.
So I want to raise not how I became who we became, but for the future, which still at 81 is what I'm much more interested in. One of the great dangers all of us run is thinking that we can never pause to sing, to dance, to tell stories, to sing the incredibly moving songs that we heard tonight from Peter. I don't believe we can change the world if we think that the only thing we ever must do is to be acting to change the world. What we also need to do, I'm talking out of course, a deep Jewish teaching about Shabbat. I asked myself, deciding to come here, is this a violation? And I don't think it is, because it is a time for us to gather, to sing, to tell each other stories, to listen to the past and to listen to the future. And we need to be able to do that. And we do not need, I've met people who say, but the corporations aren't stopping, the war machine's not stopping, how can we stop? Well,
that's what I'm saying.
The answer is exactly what makes the corporations lethal and the war machine lethal is exactly that they never pause. We need to learn also to pause.
Yes, Mark.
I'd like to close my comment with a little story. There was a person who had a great hope that he would be able to behead somebody so cleanly that the head would stay on.
Don't look at me.
And sure enough, it never happened until he was 85 years old. And at 85, the head stayed on of this person who he had just beheaded. And he did it so cleanly that the person who was beheaded spoke to him and said, hurry up, get it done with. You're known as, in the kingdom, the greatest executioner. And the executioner said and smiled, kindly nod, please. And the moral of the story is know when a nation is so totally on the wrong path, so totally wrong, that you must be able to say to it, nod please, so that you can make room for the young, for a new birth of freedom, as they say in the constitutional documents. Thank you.
Well, this is painful to put a ribbon on this, and I have prepared a brilliant summary of our discussion tonight, but I see I won't have time to give it. I know you join me in thanking these very, very courageous people.